Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I certainly want to be there in person. As I'm recording this, it is minus 30 degrees outside. In any case, we'll get started. The title of this presentation is Native Speaker, Non-Native Speaker Interaction in a Study Abroad Setting, Communication Strategies, Word Searches, and Intersubjectivity. This study examines 9 hours of audio and video recorded interactions between 3 high intermediate learners of Japanese and their Japanese host family mothers and fathers. The focus of the study is to use conversation analysis to explore how communication strategies are deployed, manipulated, and responded to as interactional resources used to find missing target word and word searches initiated by learners, the L1 speakers. Here, communication strategies are defined as linguistic and non-linguistic resources used to resolve some communication difficulty. So these include things like paraphrase, code switching, word coinage, mime, pointing, etc. The challenges of maintaining mutual understanding, or what is often called intersubjectivity, in interactions between L1 and L2 speakers are considerable. It's common, for example, for mutual understanding to be compromised and communication to be disrupted by things like lengthy negotiations and word searches. And this is why analyzing word searches and communication strategies is critically important to understanding how native speakers and non-native speakers jointly address trouble and restore mutual understanding. And how L2 speakers and their L1 interlocutors deal with troubles in talk, like word searches, has long been a topic of interest in SLA under the study of communication strategies. Now, with a conversation analysis approach, word searches have often been looked at as a subcategory of repair. The present study aims to fill several gaps in the literature. First of all, though studies show that repair mechanisms and strategies can be language specific, only a handful of studies have looked at how L2 speakers of non-English languages resolve issues with lexical retrieval. Also, there are very few studies about how L1 and L2 speakers remedy troubles in talk in naturally occurring conversation in a non-classroom learner environment, like a host family setting in study abroad. Also, compared to the traditional psycholinguistic approach to communication strategies, which essentially focuses on really just identifying and categorizing the types of communication strategies learners use, and they often use data from experimental settings that don't include an actual interacting partner, a conversation analysis approach uses natural interactional data and treats communication strategies as resources that are used not just unidirectionally by the learner, but interactively as a part of the ongoing effort to maintain and restore understanding in conversation. A conversation analysis microanalytic approach also takes into account various features of the interaction, including IDs, intonation, facial gestures, sequential order, and this can show us how co-occurring features are used with communication strategies and help us redefine communication strategies from a more interactive perspective. In short, the study aims to fill the gaps in the literature by looking at communication strategies in word searches in less commonly taught languages, specifically Japanese, using also a conversation approach to expand our understanding of how communication strategies are used as interactional resources in resolving word searches. These are the research questions for the study, and I'm not going to go over them right now. It's written in the abstract, and then I'll include it later in the discussion further on in this presentation. The participants were 3 learners of Japanese, all female, high intermediate learners of Japanese, and their Japanese host family mothers and fathers who were native speakers of Japanese. This took place during an 8-week study abroad in Japan, and recordings were done in a host family setting. So in total, there are approximately 9 hours of audio-video recorded natural conversations, approximately 50 to 60 minutes once a week. And I took these from the middle weeks, weeks 3, 4, and 5 for each of the students. In the data, I identified substantial learner-initiated word searches, and by substantial I mean longer than 5 turns. And in the end of those word searches, it was the native speaker that offered the final candidate resolution. I also used CA for SLA approach, using conversation analysis to examine the interaction, while at the same time using communication strategy labels and definitions from SLA studies as a part of the analysis. A brief explanation is required to understand a couple of basic tenets of conversation analysis. First of all, conversation analysis often investigates structure or sequential order. The idea is that interactions have a predictable structure, recognizable features, openings, closings, and that structure is the reason we are able to maintain mutual understanding or intersubjectivity. In CA, one unit of analysis is the adjacency pair. An adjacency pair consists of 2 utterances, usually occurring one right after the other, where the second pair part, referred to as SPP, is conditionally relevant to the first pair part, or FPP. And that is basically that the FPP dictates or sets a trajectory as to what is relevant, is a relevant and expected response for the SPP. This is one of the excerpts from the data that illustrates a typical word search initiated by the learner. The learner here is Jamie, and she's having a conversation with her host mother. Jamie brought her host family a clock from the US as a thank you present, and she wants to explain that it doesn't have any batteries, but she doesn't know the word. In line 1, we see speech perturbances, sucking in air, repetition, vowel lengthening, all things that indicate that she's having difficulty finding a lexical item. Now, in line 1 in particular, she uses the word kono, which is this. It's a demonstrative adjective, twice as a noun placeholder for the word she seeks, which is batteries. And that kono refers to batteries is made visible in the top because she identifies it by code switching into English. Now, Jamie's eye gaze is withdrawn from the host mother for most of the entire utterance, line 1 and 2, as indicated by the lack of the underline. So the underline portion indicates that she's looking at the host mother. But she returns her eye gaze to her host mother in line 2 as she attempts to establish that the clock is not running. And here she uses the verb shimasen, which means not doing. So shimasen is used here as an all-purpose word placeholder for the verb running or moving. And this is the first pair part that projects a response from the host mother. And the host mother responds with a request for confirmation, the second pair part, line 4, indicating that she does not fully understand what the clock is not doing, and she asks if it's not doing time. Now, the host mother's confirmation request is part of an insertion sequence that projects 2 types of relevant responses. That is, it is expected that Jamie either confirm that she is indeed talking about time, or that she clarified by providing more information about the intended meaning. Now here then, Jamie confirms that she's talking about time in line 5. So she's talking about time, she confirms this, she repeats her use of shimasen, and also repeats her use of kono, this. Her use of kono wa here is identified to be in reference to the clock as she's pointing at the clock. The host mother then provides her with a corrective verb for not moving in line 6. And she does this with a downward intonation indicating high certainty that that is the word that matches Jamie's intended meaning. So having established that the clock is not moving, Jamie begins to explain why the clock isn't working. She returns to the original missing target word, batteries, and she uses a demonstrative adjective, kono, again while marking a small object. And this is line 7. The topic particle law used after Kono projects that Jamie's sought for word is a noun. And leaving her sentence unfinished projects a conditionally relevant response of completing the sentence with an appropriate noun. And that's exactly what the host mother does. She provides a sought for word, ultimately showing that she has used the communication strategies that Jamie has given her, the demonstrative adjective and the mime, as resources to find the target word. And she says it with the following intonation, indicating that she is certain that this is a sought for word. And Jamie repeats the word in line 9, and the host mother confirms it in the next line, telling Jamie that the host mother said he would go and buy some batteries. And the word search officially comes to an end after Jamie says, yes, I understand, in line 11. What happens in the exchange illustrates how participants use communication strategies as interactional resources to co-construct meaning and progressively disambiguate the sought-for referent. And it shows how communication strategies are used within the sequential organization of word searches to guide the trajectory of the search on a turn-by-turn basis. So if we look at the rough structure, it shows that communication strategies are deployed by Jamie in the first turn as an attempt to provide information about the sought-for referent. And then there's a side sequence that involves a confirmation request and a confirmation. And then the host mother responds to the information provided by the communication strategies to provide a candidate solution. And in response to the host mother's feedback, Jamie uses other communication strategies to clarify the target word, which again the host mother uses in response to by providing a solution. Progressivity is demonstrated when Jamie uses communication strategies to systematically disambiguate the target word, first by positioning it within a broad category. She refers first to the clock. This is what we're talking about. Then she establishes that it's not running. And then having established that, she narrows down why the clock isn't running, because it doesn't have any batteries, by using communication strategies at each level then. And at the very end, using communication strategies like Kono, the demonstrative adjective, to indicate that it's a missing noun, and she uses mime to indicate that it has a particular size and shape. So she goes from broad to specific, using communication strategies at every juncture to narrow down the category within which the referent can be found. We also see how vocal or non-vocal resources are used in conjunction with communication strategies to organize the participant structure and relevant action in the unfolding talk. So for example, in line 1, when Jamie searches for a way to convey her meaning, she's not actually looking at her host mother. Her averted eye gaze during word search is an indication that the speaker, she's holding the floor and she's conducting a solitary search. And when she produces the all-purpose word strategy, shimasen, and returns her eye gaze back to the host mother, it is then that the host mother is invited to participate in the word search. And this is how communication strategies paired with eye gaze can organize participant structure into either a solitary search or a multi-party search. And intonation plays an especially important part as well when it's used to respond especially to bids for solutions to a word search. It has important consequences. In line 4, when the host mother uses a rising intonation to signal a request for confirmation, this is feedback for Jamie on whether or not her use of communication strategies was effective. And in this case, Jamie has to confirm that she is referring to the clock, not doing time. And in line 8, when the host mother provides the target word batteries, her downward intonation indicates certainty that this is the correct word. And this is feedback for Jamie, she doesn't have to continue clarifying the target word with more communication strategies. So basically, intonation is used with solutions to to offer feedback to the learner as to the level of certainty of the solution, and it projects the next relevant action of either clarifying, confirming, or that it's the end of the word search. Gestures such as mime and pointing are also used along with local resources as strategic ways of clarifying a reference location, its size and its shape, and it projects the next relevant action of providing the target word that is consistent with those specifications. The last research question is, how does a microanalytic interactional approach give us a multidimensional understanding of communication strategies that can redefine how we describe and understand communication strategies and interaction? The use of code switch in line 1, for instance, in a traditional SLA communication strategy study would normally be categorized as strategic. However, Jamie's lack of eye gaze towards her host mother and lack of question intonation marks this use of code switch as non-strategic. That is, it's not an overt attempt to compensate or elicit the sought-for word. Jamie doesn't treat it as interactionally strategic, and the host mother doesn't either, as we can see by her lack of response. And importantly, this self-addressed code switch points to a shift in how word searches may be conducted in settings where code switching into English may or may not be recognized and acted upon by the recipient. That is, the use of code switch might position the host mother to be an overhearer, but it's not actively soliciting her help in solving the word search. And while traditional communication taxonomies may label this type of self-addressed code switching as strategic, even when it's not, Jamie's use of demonstrative adjective kono would not be recognized as strategic under traditional taxonomic definitions when it clearly is. For instance, words like thingamajig and whatchamacallit are labeled or recognized as strategic, while demonstrative pronouns are not listed in taxonomies, partly because they may not be recognized because communication strategies identified in traditional taxonomies are heavily based on studies of languages that do not use demonstrative pronouns strategically, like English. But the analysis shows that it is used strategically. It identifies a sought-after referent as a noun, it's used as a placeholder, it's used with mime that indicates the approximate size and shape of the sought-for noun, and all of these are used as resources by the host mother to provide a word that matches those specifications. A CA approach can also help us clarify language-specific uses of communication strategies, or rather, L2 speakers' use of communication strategies based on cross-linguistic interference between L1 and L2. Now, this is really clear in the case of demonstratives, because demonstratives in English have only a two-way distinction. We have this and that, as compared to Japanese three-way distinction, which is this, that, and that over there. More in Japanese, you have a pronominal, which is like an independent pronoun, and an adnominal, which is considered an article or determiner followed by a noun, demonstratives that have different forms. So you have kore and sore and kono and sono. While in English, they're the exact same form. It's either this or that. Consequently, non-native speakers of Japanese often have difficulty correctly deploying demonstratives as communication strategies. Non-native speakers often mix up the adnominal or pronominal forms, as Jamie did in this excerpt. She should have used kore rather than kono. Also, whereas Japanese L1 speakers often use the distal demonstrative are, the one that means that over there, as a placeholder in word searches, studies show that learners of Japanese tend to use a Japanese proximal kore or kono, which means this, or medial demonstrative sore or sono, which is possibly a transfer from the English two-way distinction. So to summarize, through a CA for SLA approach, we can see how learners use basic strategies differently than L1 speakers. Finally, we get to the conclusions. The analysis shows how the structural provision of the basis of pairs creates constraints for how each utterance can be responded to and how each communication strategy is enacted by the learner, then acted upon by the native speaker, and responded to by the learner in a sequential action to progressively clarify the intended referent. And the progression or sequence of steps is aimed towards disambiguating the referent and maintaining intersubjectivity through the use of communication strategies. Now, an important thing to say is what CA tells us about communication strategies, and that is when we consider the use of communication strategies with eye gaze, gestures, intonation, strategies have important communicative implications. They can change participant structure or project different conditionally relevant responses. What is traditionally labeled strategic and non-strategic may not reflect real use. That is, strategic should be defined based on how interlocutors orient to what is said, rather than simple identification of surface structure, like code switching. It also shows that planning and strategic action are socially viewable, as opposed to the psycholinguistic approach, which involves guessing learner intention and thought, and that the multifunctional nature of communication strategies may not be amenable to the traditional taxonomic theories. It also shows how learner-specific use of communication strategies due to L1 interference can be different from native speaker use. Thank you for coming into the presentation today, and I believe we're Skyping in questions, so hopefully that works out and I can talk to you in a minute.